James Burns, at the age of 14, has recently been granted parole after serving time in a juvenile detention facility. He is still under court supervision, requiring him to wear a leg monitor. Tracy, James's mother, aspires for him to return to school and attempted to enroll him in the local high school. Unfortunately, the school rejected his admission due to multiple criminal records, including instances of robbery and assault. Tracy, though disappointed, had James undergo a psychological test indicating his readiness for school. Despite the test results, the school upheld its decision, advising James to seek enrollment elsewhere. Frustrated with an unsupportive environment, James, even in his newfound freedom, exhibits maintained behavioral challenges and prefers staying at home. Tracy, being a caring mother, endeavors to console him, assuring James that another school may accept him. The crucial aspect is for James to remain patient and continue exhibiting positive behavior. While Tracy seeks a school willing to admit him, James spends his time at home. Besides lacking friends, the ankle monitor poses a significant restriction on James, limiting his freedom of movement. One evening, James needed milk and headed to the nearest store. He had to return by 8 o'clock to avoid the ankle monitor triggering an alert to the authorities. Unexpectedly, James got involved in a theft orchestrated by pranksters Crystal and Manny while shopping. Rather than avoiding it, James joined them, finding joy in the experience. The trio hung out until 8 o'clock, enjoying the city atmosphere and even indulging in rolling marijuana leaves. The next day, James was invited to Cynthia's house, Crystal's new friend. Exploiting the absence of Cynthia's parents, Crystal and Manny engaged in mischief, including consuming expensive liquor and openly stealing jewelry from Cynthia's parents and Cynthia herself, who, being timid, resignedly watched her new friend's actions. The three returned from Cynthia's house, and Crystal mentioned Rock, who would appreciate James if not for the ankle monitor. Manny explained that Rock, a local drug dealer, held sway in the area, while they both served as couriers for him. When James returned home, he forgot to discard a drink bottle kept in his jacket, which his mother Tracy discovered. Tracy felt both angry and disappointed, having exerted considerable effort to keep James away from trouble and enable him to live a normal life like other children. James, too, was frustrated, believing that no schools would accept him, and the community would always view him with suspicion. Tired of trying to do the right thing, James felt that his criminal record would perpetually define his life. Exhausted by mundane routines, he decided to act on his desires. Eventually, Tracy reluctantly let James go, marking the onset of his dark journey. Desperate, he removed the ankle monitor and headed to Rock's place, as Crystal and Manny had mentioned. With courage, James sought a job and asserted that he could be more reliable than Rock's other men. Rock tested James by pointing a gun, and James remained unfazed. The following day, James called home and informed his mother that he wouldn't return. Naturally concerned, Tracy intended to fetch him, but James declined and promptly ended the call. That evening, James was tasked with driving Rock and Manny to collect items from someone's house. Unaware of the contents, James was instructed to wait and be ready at the wheel. After Rock and Manny entered the house, a few minutes later, a man was observed rushing in through the back door. Suspecting something amiss, James approached and heard a commotion inside. Acting instinctively, James slipped through the back door, armed with a Teflon. Upon entering the living room, James witnessed Rock and Manny being held up, unable to retaliate. Without hesitation, James struck the man with the Teflon, providing Rock the chance to fight back. After securing the bag containing drugs, Rock celebrated by hosting a party at a bar. James received accolades for his courage, with Rock generously rewarding him. Following his brave act, James was officially accepted and permitted to reside with Rock. Crystal also appeared increasingly interested in James, and their relationship grew closer, even to the point of them frequently sharing a bed. Receiving praise and acknowledgement from Rock fueled James' arrogance, leading him to act recklessly. While delivering goods, James sped his car, attracting police attention, and ultimately, they were apprehended with drugs. Crystal was concerned about James' arrogance potentially causing a disaster, but James dismissed the worries, confidently believing no one could hinder his actions. This became James' routine, waiting for Rock's orders to transport goods or accompany him in resolving issues. Rock highlighted one of James' actions that impressed him the most, confronting a drug dealer. Proud of James, Rock encouraged his men to emulate him. Due to this trust, James requested control over certain areas, but Rock declined, stating that the timing wasn't right. Rock urged James to continue his regular duties, assuring him of future opportunities to manage specific areas. One day, James was assigned the task of collecting money from a bar owner for drug sales. Accompanied by his friend Draw, James entered and immediately demanded the money from the bar owner. Unfortunately, the owner refused, dismissing James as a kid attempting a robbery. Frustrated and humiliated, James, angered, brandished a gun, even firing a warning shot as a bluff. Unexpectedly, two individuals intervened, sparing James from more severe consequences. Despite narrowly escaping harm, James, driven by anger, vandalized the bar owner's car. During this, he noticed a bag containing weapons and decided to take it in exchange for covering the drug payment. Upon returning home, James shared his actions with Crystal. Contrary to expecting approval, Crystal expressed disappointment, believing such actions would lead to more significant issues. Crystal aspired for James to mature like Rock, emphasizing the need for clear thinking. An argument ensued, with James rejecting the notion of being called childish. Meanwhile, Crystal grew increasingly disheartened, especially when James labeled her as a useless woman who readily responded to every man's approach. As it turned out, James had been aware that Crystal had been involved with Rock and several men from the bar. When Rock learned of this, he was furious, claiming that selling weapons was more challenging than selling drugs. This not only strained Rock's relationship with the bar owner but also jeopardized a longtime customer. Emotionally charged, Rock requested James to handle the sale of the stolen guns. Attempting to calm down, James went to the supermarket to buy a drink. However, his emotions flared up again when he couldn't access the drink he desired due to a locked refrigerator. Observing the frightened shopkeeper, Sarah, James felt sorry and decided to relieve his emotions. Unexpectedly, they connected, and Sarah, discovering James was a drug dealer, realized his kind side. They shared their stories, and Sarah revealed that she worked during school hours due to her father's unemployment. Following their initial meeting, James found comfort in talking to Sarah. From then on, they frequently met to share stories and chat, with James expressing his desire for a normal life and acceptance by others. James yearned for the carefree days of his youth and wished to experience a day like any other teenager. Surprisingly, Sarah's response was unexpected, as she didn't mind James' past and even encouraged him to change his life immediately. There seemed to be a mutual liking between them, particularly for James, who found someone genuinely caring and accepting of him. Simultaneously, the lonely Crystal sought solace in Rock's company, spending the night together. On the other hand, James felt as if he had a fresh chance at life, especially since Sarah's friends were open-minded and welcoming of his presence. They enjoyed playing basketball together, and James experienced the joy that had eluded him for so long. Grateful for Sarah's care, James relished this newfound happiness. Regrettably, this happiness was short-lived, as Rock returned, demanding James take responsibility for selling the stolen weapons. Rock had found a buyer and insisted that James go to the designated location. Initially, James resisted, expressing his desire for a peaceful life. However, Rock ignited his emotions by labeling James as a coward and ungrateful. He hinted that James might have ended up as a bum if Rock hadn't given him a job in the past. Reluctantly, James agreed to Rock's request, making it clear that this would be the last time. During the transaction, James and Drew arrived at the location using Rock's car. The usual routine began with James showcasing his weapons. However, when James requested the money, they attacked and attempted to flee. Determined not to lose, James counterattacked, causing their car to crash at a roadblock. Unfortunately, James couldn't retrieve his weapon as a police siren suddenly sounded, drawing closer. Near Rock's house, numerous police officers had already arrived, securing Rock and Crystal. James swiftly ran to meet Sarah, urging her to flee to another city. Despite James's plea, Sarah refused. She was adamant about not abandoning her life, especially since her parents still needed her. Sarah felt compelled to decline and let James go. Confused and torn, James decided to return home, only to find his mother absent at that moment. James desired to visit his sister and mother, but unfortunately, he didn't get the chance because the police hurriedly arrived and promptly arrested him. James received a 4-year prison sentence, with most of his time served in juvenile prison. It wasn't until he turned 18 that James was transferred to a public prison under Lieutenant Felton's leadership. Within just 4 months, James, displaying courage, managed to establish his own support group. In this prison, he encountered a rival named Guillermo. The dynamics between these two groups were delicate and frequently led to conflicts. For instance, when a new inmate, Chris, attempted to provoke Guillermo, James intervened. Not out of pity, but intentionally seeking chaos. The on-duty guards quickly prepared themselves, knowing that when these two groups clashed, trouble was inevitable. As anticipated, a disturbance ensued shortly afterward. During a bathing session, Guillermo aimed to stab James. Fortunately, Chris noticed and promptly informed James. This triggered another disturbance, during which Guillermo's associate seized the fallen knife and subsequently stabbed Chris. Shortly after, the police arrived, summoning James for questioning regarding the ownership of the knife used to critically stab Chris. Despite knowing that the knife belonged to Guillermo, James remained silent, asserting that he was not the complainant. For withholding information, James was confined in a solitary cell. After spending numerous days there, he was relocated to a different cell next to a life inmate named Conrad. One night, James requested a book from Conrad, but Conrad refused, ignoring James entirely. When James inquired about Conrad to his friends during a gathering in the field, they explained that Conrad was a prisoner responsible for killing 5 people outside and 2 inside prison. Intrigued, James approached Conrad, asking about the book he was reading. Though initially unresponsive, Conrad eventually answered James' questions. Continuing the conversation, James shared his plan to confront Guillermo. Conrad responded with a smile, cautioning James that such actions would lead to regret. On a visit from his mother, Tracy recounted stories about her busy life, revealing that James' sister deeply missed him. Tracy advised James to improve his behavior, emphasizing that a positive attitude during examination hearings might lead to remission, potentially securing his freedom by Christmas. Following his mother's visit, James often reflected on his mistakes, experiencing regret and channeling his emotions onto paper. He started expressing his remorse through poetry, documenting his life story. Conrad, who read James' work, provided supportive encouragement, urging him to continue writing. Night after night, James penned his thoughts, and Conrad, having listened, was convinced that James possessed a hidden, positive side. Upon Chris's recovery, James apologized for involving him in the fight. Chris, sharing that his mother visited weekly and provided vital support, listened as James suggested steering clear of trouble to improve his chances at the upcoming examination hearing. However, Chris's hope for freedom was shattered when, before the trial, he was attacked by Guillermo. Consequently, Chris appeared at the hearing with a battered face, resulting in an additional 6 years added to his sentence and leaving him profoundly frustrated. During the exercise session for all the inmates, Chris unexpectedly fashioned a makeshift rope from a pillowcase and blanket. Observing Chris on the brink of attempting suicide, a majority of the convicts urged him to jump immediately. This caused panic among the officers, and even James joined in shouting at Chris to dissuade him. The imminent hearing compounded James's guilt, making him irritable. Conrad reminded James to be mindful of his conduct, emphasizing the potential for remission the following day. He shared anecdotes about unpredictable outcomes in the prison, highlighting cases where a troublemaker gained freedom and a well-behaved individual remained incarcerated. Conrad aimed to make James recognize the opportunity for a better life beyond prison. James, entrenched in his pride, engaged in actions aimed at boosting his self-esteem, resembling the behavior of a child seeking respect. Conrad's words resonated with James, prompting him to face the trial with a different perspective. He endeavored to articulate his feelings, expressing his fears and concerns about life. He presented the jury with comprehensive writings detailing all his past crimes. James expressed sincere remorse, acknowledging that, regardless of the jury's decision to extend his sentence, he was prepared to accept all punishments and risks associated with his actions. Surprisingly, James's confessions and words convinced the judges, leading to his release. His sister and mother promptly retrieved him, fulfilling his mother's Christmas wish for a joyous family reunion. Several weeks later, James endeavored to lead an upright life by securing employment at a game center, despite the significant salary difference from his previous involvement with rock. Some friends approached James, tempting him to rejoin the drug trade. Initially resistant, James succumbed due to frequent belittlement, agreeing to participate as a courier for a single occasion. His intention afterward was to leave town and distance himself from his troubled past. Prior to delivering the drugs, James took a moment to meet Sarah, only to discover she was engaged. While slightly disappointed, James found happiness in Sarah moving on with her life and finding someone capable of bringing her joy. They engaged in a candid conversation, unburdening themselves and finding peace with James's tumultuous past. James shared a poem he wrote during his prison days, and Sarah felt immense pride, confident that James's future would be markedly improved. Following this meeting, James conducted a transaction that night, securing his share. The subsequent day, accompanied by his mother, James relocated to New York, where he commenced rebuilding his life from scratch. He secured employment in an office with a modest salary. Up until 2014, James resided in New York, concurrently pursuing studies at Manhattan Community College, focusing on writing and poetry. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell if you want to watch more videos like this. Thank you for watching and see you again soon. Take care.